Some people claim that the world's ice sheets are actually growing and not shrinking. What do you think about this?
Some people claim that the Earth is flat.
Polar bears are actually going to be an extinct species unless something really drastically happens and people can't see it. God's sakes, I don't know why.
Today I read that they're saying the ice is melting in the Arctic, and yet it's 20 times thicker than it was for the last 10 years, as a complete contradiction to what we're being told.
Lots of people think that we're going into another ice age and that the glaciers and the ice caps are actually getting bigger. Is that true?
There is this idea that some glaciers, or maybe most glaciers, have actually been increasing in mass. They've been growing. It's a theory proposed by people such as David Bellamy. He was a very influential and quite well-loved British personality. He was a TV presenter, he was a botanist, he was a scientist. And for various reasons, he came to the conclusion that glaciers were increasing, that climate change wasn't necessarily real, but he was using very particular types of data. He was kind of cherry picking. And since then, we can see there's overwhelming evidence that pretty much all of the Earth's glaciers are shrinking. The amount of snow that then makes ice is not sufficient to keep up with the amount that's melting. We're talking about hundreds of glaciers, and pretty much nearly all of them, there are a couple of exceptions, nearly all of them are shrinking, and they're shrinking quite rapidly. For a period of time, the ice sheet in Antarctica was increasing. And there are various ideas and theories as to why that was the case.
One thing that's happening in Antarctica is that as you warm the climate up, that allows more water vapour to be held in the atmosphere. That's a physical law. And that means that there are some parts of East Antarctica where precipitation is falling as snow more than it used to. So there's a bit of a balance there, but the main part of Antarctica where it's losing ice is the West Antarctic ice sheet.
I first went to Antarctica over 30 years ago. We never really thought about the climate issue because there's hardly any melting that's going on until about 2017. And since then, the Antarctic sea ice has been retreating. And this year, we've seen crazy reduction that we'd never seen before.
So, questions have been asked about why sea level isn't rising particularly quickly. You know, you get these horror stories about the climate crisis and a millimetre or so of sea level rise a year, and people, you know, is that a real thing? Is that happening? There's a key difference to point out, and that is there's sea ice and there's land ice.
The large-scale masses of ice in the poles are all land-based. So Antarctica is a continent, Greenland is a set of islands. Around those large ice masses is the ocean, and the ocean, at certain times, the earth freezes, and we call that sea ice.
Where land ice melts, it can add to the ocean basin, but the melting of sea ice doesn't directly contribute to any sea level rise at all, because it's already floating.
The amount of mass of ice that's being lost from Antarctica is 6 times greater now than it was in 1990. What happens in the Arctic and the Antarctic affects the whole planet. Ordinarily, these places are covered with snow and ice, and they reflect the sun's energy back out into space. So it acts as a refrigerant for the planet. But what we've seen in the Arctic since the 1970s is that layer of ice that lies over the Arctic Ocean is melting away. And so that white reflecting surface is being replaced by a dark absorbing surface by the ocean. And the ocean heats up as a consequence. And so that's why in the Arctic we've seen temperatures rise by 4 times the rate of the rest of the planet.
If you look at the long-term trend of all these things, we see significant reductions in ice extent and significant increases in temperature. We also need to think about ice thickness and volume. What we also know is that even if the ice recovers, as we call it, from year to year, because obviously it does get bigger during the winter because it gets colder. It's still cold at the pole, still below zero. It's usually very new ice. It's very thin. What we are seeing, which is very concerning, is the loss of the multi-annual sea ice, which is the thicker ice, the more reflective ice as well.
Here's the worrying thing. Since 1850, there's been 20 centimetres of sea level rise. From here on, you stop talking about centimetres and you start talking about metres. The severity of this issue can't be overstated. If we don't reduce carbon dioxide to net zero by mid-century, it will completely reshape many countries around the world.
In statistics, and I teach statistics, it is easy to cherry pick data, it is easy to manipulate data to pursue an agenda or to make a point. But the huge amount of literature and work, and we're talking thousands of scientists over thousands of hours who have worked to disprove each other, because that's what we do in science, we love to disprove each other. All of us have come to that same conclusion and looked at that data and seen that. So in this day and age with social media, you always need to check where that data is coming from and what they maybe want from you.
The world's ice pretty much everywhere has seriously been melting, and the general trend over time is a major decline.